I'm going to tell you something that took me 95 years to understand. And I want you to really sit with that number for a second. 95. That's not a typo. That's not me being dramatic for the camera. I have lived through the Great Depression, 14 presidents, a world war, a Cold War, the invention of the television, the internet, and now whatever the heck TikTok is. And through all of it, through all of those decades, all of those paychecks, all of those moments where I thought I was doing things right, I made one fundamental mistake with money that kept real wealth just far enough out of reach that I could never quite grab it. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, it wasn't complicated. It wasn't some secret that rich people were hiding from me. It was simple, embarrassingly simple. And I need to tell you about it before you waste as many years as I did finding out the hard way. My name is Bill. I'm 95 years old. I am sitting in the same chair I've sat in for the last 30 years. I've got a cup of coffee that's gone cold because I keep forgetting to drink it. And today, I'm going to give you the financial education that nobody, not my father, not my teachers, not any employer I ever had, ever gave me. If you're young, this might be the most important thing you hear this year. If you're my age, well, maybe we can laugh together and feel a little less alone about it. And before we get into it, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. I'm 95 years old. I don't know how many of these videos I've got left in me, and I'd hate for you to miss a single one. Let me start at the beginning because that's where the mistake starts for most people, including me. I was born in 1930. My family didn't have money. Not the kind of, we're a little tight this month money trouble you might be familiar with. I mean real, bone-deep, nothing in the icebox poverty. My father worked at a factory 6 days a week and brought home just enough to keep the lights on and the kids fed. Barely. There was no talk of savings in our house. There was no talk of investment. There was no conversation around the dinner table about compound interest or stock markets or building something for the future. The conversation around our dinner table was, eat your bread because there's nothing else. So I grew up with one understanding of money and one understanding only. Money was something you earned, you spent to survive, and then you went back and earned more. That was the cycle. That was the whole picture. And I carried that picture with me like it was a photograph in my wallet, worn at the edges, faded, but never thrown away. When I was 18, I got my first real job, a proper job. I was working at a hardware store, stocking shelves and helping customers load lumber into their trucks. I remember my first paycheck like it was yesterday. I held that paper and I felt something I'd never felt before in my life. Possibility. Real, warm, honest possibility. I had money. I had earned money. And I felt rich. What did I do with it? I spent it. Of course I did. Because that's what I had been taught without anyone ever saying a word. Money comes in, money goes out. You work, you live, you work again. I bought myself a new pair of boots. I took a girl out to a diner. I felt like a man, and I was proud of myself for doing it. Nobody stopped me to say, "Bill, even if you put away just a little of that, just $2 out of every 10, something extraordinary would happen over time." Nobody said that. And I didn't know to ask. I was 18 years old in 1948, and financial literacy was not a phrase that existed in my world. This went on for years. I want you to understand, I was not lazy. I was not irresponsible in the way people imagine when they hear, "He never built wealth." I worked hard every single day of my adult life. I got raises. I changed jobs when better ones came along. I was, by any reasonable measure, a responsible man who did what he was supposed to do. I provided for my family. I kept a roof over our heads. I never missed a bill payment. By the standards I had been given, I was doing everything right. But I wasn't building anything. I was running on a treadmill that felt like a road. I looked like I was moving forward. The scenery kept changing. New house, new car, kids getting bigger, life getting fuller. But the financial foundation underneath all of it was barely thicker than the carpet I was standing on. And here is the first mistake I want you to understand, because it's the one that started everything else. I confused earning with building. I thought that if I earned enough money, wealth would naturally follow. I thought wealth was just the overflow of income. Like if you pour enough water into a glass, eventually it'll fill up and spill over into something bigger. But that's not how it works. Not even a little bit. Earning and building are two completely different activities, and nobody ever taught me that they require different habits, different thinking, and different choices. I earned good money for most of my working life, good, honest working man money, but I spent almost all of it on living. And before you say, "Well, Bill, you had a family to take care of," yes, I did. And yes, a lot of the spending was necessary, but not all of it. Not even most of it. If I'm being honest with myself at 95, in a way I wasn't able to be at 45. I bought things I didn't need because I deserved them. That was the word I used over and over for decades. Deserved. I worked hard. I deserved a new truck. I put in long hours. I deserved a vacation we couldn't quite afford. The kids deserved new bikes even though the old ones still worked. Deserve was the word that quietly, steadily, leak by leak, drained any chance I had of actually accumulating something real. And this is the chapter I want you to sit with longest. Because I have watched 3 generations of people in my own family make the exact same mistake. My children made it. My grandchildren are making it right now. And I see it everywhere, on every screen, in every advertisement, in every social media post that shows a young person buying something beautiful to celebrate something ordinary. The culture we live in has turned spending into an act of self-worth. And it is robbing you the same way it robbed me. Slowly, invisibly, and with a smile on its face. Now, the second chapter of this story is the one that really stings, because this is where I had chances, real chances. multiple of them. And I let every single one slip through my fingers like sand. I was 34 years old when a man I worked with, a quiet fellow, nothing flashy about him, drove an old car and brought his lunch every single day, told me he was buying stock in a company. This was 1964. The company wasn't famous yet. He explained to me how it worked, how you could buy a small piece of a business, and if that business grew, your piece grew with it. He wasn't pushy about it. He just mentioned it, the way you might mention the weather. I thought he was either very smart or very foolish. I told myself I didn't have money to risk, and I walked away from that conversation, and I never thought about it again for 30 years. That man retired at 58. He didn't buy a yacht. He didn't become a millionaire in the Hollywood sense of the word. But he stopped working 27 years before I did, and he spent the rest of his life doing exactly what he wanted, going where he pleased, never once lying awake at night worrying about whether his money would outlast him. I thought about him a lot when I finally did retire. I retired at 71 because I had to. My body had decided for me that the work was done. And I remember looking at my savings, everything I had managed to put together over a lifetime of work, and feeling a quiet kind of shame that I had not felt since I was a boy with holes in my shoes. Not because I was destitute. I want to be clear about that. I had enough to live on. But enough to live on and wealth are not the same country. They're not even the same continent. Here is the second mistake, and it is the one I think about most. I treated investing like gambling, and because I treated it like gambling, I never started. I told myself it was risky. I told myself ordinary people like me didn't do things like that. I told myself I'd do it someday when I had more to spare. Someday became a decade became 3. And compound interest, the most powerful force in personal finance, the thing Albert Einstein reportedly called the 8th wonder of the world, worked its magic for everyone who started early and worked absolutely nothing for me because I never let it start. If I had taken $50 a month, $50, the cost of a few dinners out, and put it into a simple index fund starting when I was 30 years old, by the time I was 70, at an average market return, I would have had more than $250,000 sitting there. From $50 a month, money I spent on things I cannot even remember now, things that are gone, things that left no trace. Instead, I had the memory of a lot of nice weekends and a retirement account that made my stomach hurt every time I looked at it. I want you to feel the weight of that, not to punish yourself if you've made the same choice, but to feel the real cost of waiting. Every year you delay starting is not just 1 year of growth you miss. It's the compounding of that year, and the year after, and the year after that. The math is almost cruel in how honest it is. Time is the engine. Money is the fuel. But without time, even a full tank gets you nowhere. And here is what nobody talks about: the psychological reason why so many ordinary people, working people, good people, never invest. It's not just that they don't know how. It's that investing feels like taking something away from your present life to give it to a future self who doesn't feel quite real yet. At 30, your 70-year-old self is a stranger, a ghost, a theoretical person in a future you can barely imagine. Why would you sacrifice something today for a stranger? That's what your brain tells you. And your brain is very good at making that argument sound reasonable. I know because I listened to it for 40 years. The only way to beat that argument is to make the future self real. To sit down and actually imagine, in detail, with honesty, what your life looks like at 70, at 80, at 90, if you never build anything. Imagine the options you won't have, the trips you won't take, the help you'll need that you'll have to ask for because you can't afford to pay for it. Imagine depending on other people when you spent your whole life being someone others could depend on. That image, that honest, uncomfortable image, that's what might finally make you move. The third and final chapter is the one I almost didn't include, because it's the most personal. But I'm 95. I've earned the right to be personal. The third mistake I made was one of identity. And this might be the deepest one of all. I identified as a working man. That was who I was. I worked hard, I earned my pay, I came home tired and honest. That was my dignity. That was my self-respect. And deep down, for reasons I didn't fully understand until I was very, very old, I associated wealth, real, accumulated wealth, with a kind of person I didn't think I was supposed to be. Rich people were different. They were born different, educated different, connected different. They moved in circles I would never move in. And on some level that I was never quite willing to look at directly, I believed that trying to become wealthy was reaching above my station, that it was presumptuous, that it wasn't for someone like me. And so I didn't try. Not really. Not with intention. I worked hard and I spent what I earned and I told myself that was good enough. That was the honest life. That was what decent people did. And I was wrong. Not about working hard. That part was right. But about the idea that building wealth was somehow separate from my identity as a working person. That was a lie I had absorbed from somewhere, from the culture around me, from the way the world had always been presented to me. And I never questioned it until it was far too late to do anything about it. Wealth is not a personality type. It is not a birthright. It is not reserved for people with a certain accent or a certain education or a certain kind of last name. Wealth is a set of habits. That's it. That's the whole secret. It is deciding, consciously, deliberately, against every comfortable instinct you have, to spend less than you earn and put the difference somewhere that works for you while you sleep. That's the whole philosophy. Everything else is decoration. I could have done that. A hardware store clerk in 1948 could have done that. My father, working at that factory 6 days a week, could have done a version of that. The money didn't need to be large. It just needed to be consistent, and it needed to start early. Two things I had complete control over and never used. I want to say something directly to whoever is watching this and thinking, this is all well and good, but I'm barely getting by. I don't have extra money to invest. I hear you. I believe you. And I'm not here to tell you that your situation isn't real or that it's easy. But I am asking you to look one more time, one honest, uncomfortable time, at your spending. Not to find the big things, because the big things are usually genuinely necessary. Look at the small things, the daily things, the automatic things you spend money on without even deciding to. Because in my experience, and I have 95 years of it, the small things are almost always where the answer is hiding. $10 a day is $3,650 a year. Over 30 years, invested at a modest rate of return, that is more money than most people I knew ever had in their lives. $10 a day. A lunch, a coffee and a snack, a subscription you forgot you had, one fewer dinner out per week. It is almost never about one big sacrifice. It is almost always about 100 small, almost invisible decisions made differently, consistently, over time. I am 95 years old. I am not telling you this to impress you or to make you feel bad. I am telling you this because I have nothing left to gain from it, and that means you can trust it. I don't have a course to sell you. I don't have a book coming out. I have a cold cup of coffee and a finite number of mornings left. And I would like to spend some of them making sure that the people who come after me don't have to sit in a chair at 95 and wonder what might have been different. Start now. Not Monday. Not when things settle down. Not when you get the next raise. Now. Even if it's $5. Even if it's $10. Open the account today. Make the first small deposit today, and then do it again next week, and the week after. And don't stop. Don't stop for a new truck. Don't stop for a vacation. Don't stop for deserve. Because deserve is the most expensive word in the English language, and nobody tells you that until it's too late. It took me 95 years to understand it clearly. I'm hoping it takes you considerably less. If this meant something to you, if you heard something in here that landed somewhere real, please share it with someone you love, a son or daughter, a young person just starting out, a friend who's been saying someday for too long. Because the most generous thing I can think of doing with the time I have left is making sure the lesson I learned the hard way doesn't have to be learned that way by everyone else. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to this channel. I know I'm not the flashiest fellow on the internet. I don't have fancy graphics or a ring light or any idea what a thumbnail is supposed to look like, but I've got 95 years of honest living and I'd like to share what I've learned from it. That has to count for something. Thank you for listening. I'm going to go reheat my coffee now.